Hi, everybody, and welcome to the trade deadline episode of GoodHacks. Max Goodman, Tim Hackett, live from our podcast center for GoodHacks Season 2. And it's, not a whole lot here, but we're here in the podcast center.
Chilling in the studio.
But we thought there wasn't going to be a whole lot in the trade deadline either. We thought we were going to have a light episode. We've been planning this for a while. We've been teasing this for weeks, that this was going to be the day we were going to talk all about the trade deadline. And then a couple of hours before the deadline, there were a couple of big deals that were done in the days leading up to Wednesday that we'll talk about. But on Wednesday itself, Wednesday afternoon, not a whole lot going on. But then finally, a couple of hours before the deadline, even up to maybe half an hour after the deadline, Max, things finally, the levees broke, if you will.
Oh my gosh, yes. So the Stroman deal and the Bauer deal were in the days before Wednesday.
And we'll talk about those.
We'll get to all of that. Yeah. But we're talking, 1:30 Central Time on Wednesday afternoon. Tim and I were together. We do hang out outside of our GoodHacks activities.
Unfortunately for him.
And I started reading off tweets that I saw on my phone. We were on the train heading downtown, and like you said, the levees opened. They were just rattling off, like the insiders, Nightingale, Heyman, Rosenthal, all these guys were tweeting, and it was one after another, all the way through when the deadline actually happens, which I'm sure it's pencils down for the teams themselves, but for us at home, it's a loose deadline because you'll still hear about the biggest deals, like the Greinke deal, like a half an hour later.
Of course,
you'll hear the details later.
Right. The rule is that I think that the deals have to be submitted to the commissioner's office by that deadline. So 4 p.m. Eastern this year on Wednesday the 31st. And so then, of course, as you say, the details will all trickle out. And obviously there are some, players to be named later in cash considerations. We won't know those details for a couple of days yet. But yeah, you'll see the final details, the bare bones details trickle out half an hour or so after the deadline. So it is a soft deadline in that regard, but everything has to be finalized.
Yeah, and I mentioned Nightingale, not to throw Bob under the bus here, but he tweeted, this is one of the most dull deadlines I've ever seen in my career. And then it absolutely engulfed into flames, and everything blew up.
Well, it's the complete opposite, right? You were saying that there's a record for trades at this deadline, but let's take it in context.
That's the big stat. So 30 deals went down, 77 players were moved, which, in retrospect, we saw that stat, and we were thinking that you might think it might have even been more. I mean,
just in terms of how many
fall, numerically,
track everything, of course.
But the previous records were 18 trades and 43 players moved. So 12 more trades and almost
34.
40 more players were moved. That was 2016 was the trades record and 2018 was the players record. Okay. But that's, again, you can't put that into perspective with this because now the waiver deadline doesn't exist anymore. Right. So everything had to happen on July 31st, whereas in the past everything could have happened in the next month.
And there are a couple of exceptions that I was just reading about earlier today that we won't get into, where you can move players after this deadline. The baseline rule is that these players must not have appeared in the majors. A lot of them won't be on the 40-man, so they aren't even waiver moves like in previous years. It's a little bit convoluted.
Is Rule 5 coming up?
Yeah, that still exists,
that's part of it.
But that's a little bit later on, and those are different things, and those players won't have impacts this year necessarily. So those other players that are moved, the chances of them having huge, if any, impacts at a major league level are very slim. But there's, if you care about Double-A, then there's a chance that players like that could get moved. So
you might care about Double-A. Tim cares about Double-A.
This is true. So the point is, in the grand scheme of things, any moves made here in August or later won't have really any effect on major league outcomes this year.
Okay.
So the point is, July 31st, 4 p.m. Eastern. Give or take 15 minutes or so, all the trades were finalized, and finally, 25 of those 30 deals came through in the last 2 hours.
It honestly felt like that, yeah.
But a couple of important trades made in the days before, really, for me, setting the scene for what we saw. This is what we thought would happen with these trades that happened. We thought that we might, see the after effects starting, Wednesday morning, not Wednesday at the deadline. But the fact of the matter is, in my opinion, these trades did set the scene. So let's go chronologically for me with the first big trade that was made. One of the best starting pitchers that everybody knew was going to be on the market, Marcus Stroman, went from the Toronto Blue Jays, but not to a team that anybody really figured.
No,
people thought the Yankees. I thought the Oakland A's, which I guess was a little bit of a take in itself. But he ends up going to a middle-of-the-division team in the Mets, a team that you're not quite sure if you're buying or selling. You have other people on your roster that are on the block. No one who ends up actually being moved, though. Syndergaard and Wheeler both stayed put. And you come out of the deadline, you give up Anthony Kay and Simeon Woods-Richardson, which I don't know their system too well, but they're touted pitching prospects. So the Blue Jays got something back.
They're both top 10 prospects in the Mets system.
So there you go.
And they're both going to be top 15 prospects in the Jays system.
Now, whether or not either of those guys turns into the next ace in the Blue Jays staff, that's how trades go.
Of course.
You don't know. But the Mets come out of this deadline, and they're 11 games back in the NL East, which obviously is not striking distance at this point.
With 3 teams to pass.
Right. But in the wild card, they're 4 games out of the second spot. And they come out of this with a rotation including Jacob deGrom, who won the Cy Young last year, Noah Syndergaard, who is having a good year, and right after or was it right before the deadline, that White Sox start? He pitched like 8 innings.
Okay.
He demolished the White Sox. He gave up maybe 1 run, I think it was.
You know his potential regardless.
Right. Wheeler is a very solid pitcher. Steven Matz is a very solid pitcher if healthy.
This year, sure.
And now Stroman.
You've got Stroman.
So that's got to be up there with the best rotations in the league.
Well, we talked about when we were profiling Stroman and guessing where he might go, that on a lot of, obviously he's the ace really this year on the Blue Jays, has been for the last 2 years or so.
Sure.
And we thought that he would be an easy number 2 on pretty much any, because let's be honest, the Blue Jays are not a very good team
not
this
a number
year.
1.
Exactly. So
Right.
that's why we profiled him going to the A's. That's why he made sense maybe going to a team like the A's, because he would be a debatable 1, 2, or 3, depending on where you want to slide him in, depending on how you feel about Brett Anderson.
Yeah, I thought he was going to slide in as the 1
I thought
and
so
pitch
too.
the wild card game for
That
them.
would make sense. So now he goes to the Mets, and he's maybe a number 3 pitcher. And if that's the case,
I think he is the number.
I would think so too.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then you're right. This makes this rotation fantastic.
Right.
With as solid of a year as Zack Wheeler is having, and you round out the rotation with Steven Matz now that Jason Vargas is gone, he's off to the
Right.
Phillies. That's excellent. 1 through 5.
Yeah, I guess the only flaw is that besides Matz, it's all righties.
Okay.
I don't know how strict you feel about the righty-lefty stuff. I don't mind that much. I mean, if you had a rotation of Scherzer, every solid righty in the league right now, of course I blank on every other.
Put Scherzer into that mix.
Greinke, Cole, Verlander. Oh wait, and just 5 amazing righty starters. Like I wouldn't complain about that necessarily. You know what I'm saying?
Of course, the biggest issue would be in a playoff series if you need matchups. But when you need to win games,
that's what
you
the
want your
bullpen
best,
is for too.
That's a good point.
So
when you need to win games to make up ground, you need the best pitchers out there. It doesn't matter what they look like.
Right. And the other thing I was going to say is that everybody seems to get hurt in that organization, but that's out of the general manager's control to a certain extent. So now, do they have the offense to, pass 3 teams and get into a 3-way tie for the wild card right now? So there's a total of 6 teams ahead of them in the standings. I think you can kind of count out the D-backs, who are 0.5 games ahead of the Mets in the wild card standings. The D-backs did a lot. They gave away a lot. They ended up keeping Robbie Ray, which is interesting. We talked so much about which team Robbie Ray was going to go to.
Sure.
And the Giants held on to Bumgarner. They might be going all in. They traded Sam Dyson to the Twins, but it seems like they kept all of their other valuable pieces, and they're 2.5 games back. So the Mets have a lot of work to do.
Right.
And I don't know if this is them buying in. It might just be, hey, here's a guy who's from Long Island, who was a Mets fan growing up. It's a sentimental ad. He wanted to play for the Mets in that sense that he was a fan of them as a kid.
Okay.
And there's a little bit of control there in terms of the future, and maybe he'll want to stay because of that emotional past value in terms of his relationship with the team. But I don't know. They have a lot of young pieces. I just don't think they can make it this year, which is why it's intriguing that they would have given away prospects to get guys that would have helped right now. But
that's the ultimate question, isn't
Right.
it? Is what do we think the point was? Why do the Mets make this trade? You bring in a controllable pitcher. We talked about offsetting the loss of Zack Wheeler, who's a free agent after this year. Noah Syndergaard is arbitration eligible after this year. DeGrom is locked up.
Right.
So we talked about those first 4 guys being excellent. You might lose half of them. And one of them is Noah Syndergaard after this year.
Right.
So that's entirely possible. It's on the table. So now you have another controllable pitcher for next year, and you try, my guess is, something that is in the general manager's control, to use that to leverage getting those guys back, Syndergaard especially.
That's a good point.
So now you've got another pitcher left in to say, look, we have this core, we have these young guys, we have the presumed NL Rookie of the Year on the roster, Pete Alonso, and a couple of other folks here and there.
Sure.
So now you try to bring those guys back next year. But that's next year.
Yeah.
I mean, your point is correct, that they are within striking distance this year. Does this move for a guy as good as Marcus Stroman is, does bringing him in make the Mets any more of a contender for the wild card this year?
I mean, does it make them more of a... Sure. I mean, he's a tremendous pitcher, and he's going to help them win some games. It's not like he's just going to sit out the rest of the year.
Right.
But even with that, they didn't get better in the bullpen, and they didn't add on offense. So the rest of their team is the same. So sure, 1 out of 5 days, Stroman, if everything works out, will pitch 7 innings and give up 1 run. But if you don't score, that's what they dealt with last year with DeGrom.
Sure.
So
Precisely right. Sure.
is McNeil, Alonso, Rosario, is that a big enough young big 3 for them to get through this year? I don't think so. I'm forgetting Conforto, but I think that this is a great core to build around. And like you said, the worst case scenario for the Mets is you come back with DeGrom and Stroman at the head of your rotation. That's great.
Sure.
That's what you want. That's 2 aces. Either of those guys could be a number 1 on any team, I think.
And if that's the plan, though...
You know what I mean.
Well, of course. But if that was the plan, then wouldn't you have wanted to trade Syndergaard to get other people to build around those two?
Right, which is the confusing point here. Why didn't you then, ask for a little bit less just to get something for Wheeler? Because now, odds are he's just going to walk, and you're not getting anything. Or are you holding on to him because you're hoping he pitches Game 4 of the NLDS? Like, I don't know what they're thinking. If I was a Mets fan, I'd be very confused. But as we'll get to, if I was a Blanks fan, I'd be very confused in a lot of different situations.
There are loads of different, well, if you'll pardon the poor choice of words, moving parts onto all of these different things. And there are literal moving parts here as well that has made this, well, I mean, to use your word, very confusing.
Right.
So I don't know exactly what the goal for the Mets was, and for a lot of these other, let's be honest, middling teams.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't understand the rationale for a lot of them. So we'll break. Let's get into it. Here's another team. The centerpiece of this team is very much not a middling team. They're in the playoffs right now. But the trade that broke the camel's back, proverbially speaking, something that you actually predicted, didn't go exactly as you predicted, but the after effects still existed. Trevor Bauer traded from Cleveland, but not to a quote-unquote contender, not to be another ace on a World Series team like
Sure.
we considered might be a possibility, but he was ultimately traded to the Reds in something that I feel like we see a little bit of every year. You often see this in the NBA, less so in all other sports. A 3-team trade.
Yeah.
Those are nuts, and I don't know. I never know how exactly they get done, but they're so fun to try to hash out. And this, to me, until 4:20 Eastern time, hooray, was the absolute takeaway trade of the year, of this year rather, because of just how crazy the Trevor Bauer trade was.
it epitomizes a blockbuster deal. I mean, you have top prospects, you have very effective 20-plus home run hitters at the big league level, and you have an ace. What are they missing? A bullpen arm, I guess, is the only thing that wasn't involved. But
Logan Allen could be that, I guess.
Right. So, first of all, I wonder how those go down. Like, is it a conference call?
Yeah.
Is it a 3-way Skype? Like, I guess with technology these days, that
Easier
certainly
than ever.
helps.
Don't have to send faxes everywhere.
Right. I don't think they made these deals back in 1910.
Right.
3-way trade.
You send a note.
Anyways, really intriguing for all 3 teams. I think that the Indians came away with a ton of pieces. And that's what I talked about in my past video, where I predicted that Bauer would go to the Yankees, and that would set all the dominoes to start falling, and that Greinke would end up being traded potentially. So that was, thank you for giving me some credit. I did get that right. But anyways, I think that the Indians won this trade in the sense that you come away with Logan Allen, who is a very good pitching prospect. He's not necessarily proven yet, but he's a lefty, and he's good.
Struggled in the majors this year, but he's been great up till then.
He just started.
This is his first year with any.
There's a lot of potential there.
Correct.
And then you're getting Yasiel Puig, who you know what he's capable of when he's at his best.
And
you know that he's going to fight for your team and your teammates.
Quite literally. No, quite literally.
And you also get Franmil Reyes, who, friend of the show, he's a guy that we've talked about with a ton of upside, a guy that could potentially end up with 40 home runs this year. So we've talked about the Indians being a pitcher-heavy team, and the conversation that we've had multiple times this year is, are the Indians' arms going to beat the Twins' bats? And that was it, that those two teams were very one-faceted. But now, sure, it's only two guys. I don't think that this fixes whatever issue necessarily, but you can put both of those two in the middle of that order, and it takes them from here to here. They're better now. And what did they give up? They gave up Trevor Bauer, who's been there for quite some time. And did you see that video that he posted on Twitter?
Yeah.
I was in the feels after watching it. Like, it was really well done. And you could tell for how eclectic Trevor Bauer is that it meant a lot to him, his time in Cleveland. And he was
not something he had to do.
sad to go.
Sure.
I don't think it was necessarily his choice. But
to leave.
No. Right. But he could have left in the offseason. And that was the big thing, that he's notorious for signing those one-year deals in free agency. He's notorious for not dating people, apparently. Like, he's very interesting.
Yep.
And he could have left, he could have walked, and they could have gotten nothing back for an ace-caliber pitcher. But here they get a ton of people. So I didn't mention Scott Moss and Victor Nova.
Yeah.
Those are the other two. So Logan Allen, Yasiel Puig, Franmil Reyes, and those two.
They basically got 5 players for one.
5 players for one.
Right.
And then the other piece, how the Padres got involved, is they got Taylor Trammell from the Reds. Right. And Trammell is the guy who tried to steal home in the Futures game during All-Star Weekend. And he hit a home run in the Futures game last year as well. So he's touted too.
Supposedly, what I've read is that the Padres really believe in his ability to be a future starter. Obviously, that's the hope, but a lot of people think that he profiles as a left fielder. They supposedly believe he could play center. He's fast enough, as you just mentioned with the steal of home.
He's quick.
The attempt, he's clearly fast enough. So they think his defense is strong enough to be in center field. Obviously, they have Manuel Margot out there right now. Similar-ish player.
You get your leadoff hitter who plays center field, and
that's what
what
I think is best case scenario. And so you keep your right fielder in Hunter Renfroe. You've got your future center fielder there in Trammell, and then you round it out.
And my guess is that they may have tried to have Renfroe be that piece.
Yep.
And the Indians were like, no, we want Reyes because he's younger and the upside is a little higher. And
I think that's entirely
possible. You know what? Sure.
I think that's entirely possible.
But Tim, I don't really know what the Reds are doing here, which is what I want to talk about next. They give away some pieces. They give away, I think Trammell is a top 5 prospect for them, and they're getting back, yes, he's an ace, but my guess is that he leaves in the offseason.
It's possible.
So you're coming away with absolutely nothing from this deadline-specific move. And when you look at the Reds, they're not in the playoff hunt. We thought that, if pigs flew, that they would potentially sneak into the wild card, but Joey Votto is not the Joey Votto of old, and they dealt Scooter Gennett because he has
been hurt
he's not what he was.
Regressed.
Sure. So it's not like the Reds are close and contending. You just pull it up. They're 6.5 games out of the wild card, and that's before even getting into the division that they're in, the best division in baseball. So are you thinking that, oh yeah, Derek Dietrich, he's going to get us to the wild card game? And now they have Trevor Bauer, so yes, they have an ace. They have someone to pitch at the top of the rotation,
Yeah,
along with Castillo.
Right, so there's a 1-2 for the ages, a top 5 National League Cy Young and somebody who would have been top 12 in American League Cy Young.
But that's my thing. I don't think Bauer stays. Like, why would he stay? Not only is Great American Ballpark one of the most hitter-friendly ballparks in the league, but they're not as good as they were in 2012 or early 2010s.
Yeah, something like that.
So I just don't get that move, to be honest. We try to have, analysis on everything, but if I'm a Reds fan, I'm scratching my head, I guess is what I'm going to go for here. I'll after every trade that we talk about, I'll say if I'm a blank fan, I'm blank. So just stay tuned for that.
But if you're an Indians fan, to your point that you made in the previous video when you were predicting this trade, a trade like this
Pretty
was a
happy
possibility, what you said, and I'll let you reiterate it to give you the floor here. The point was, the reason that this was an option, maybe trading Bauer, and something that I didn't think about this is when I said I figured he was going to stay, is that there are enough other guys that exist in the rotation to be placeholders for everybody else to try to come back and continue to be that ace of the. So obviously Corey Kluber is the big story there, but everybody else still is there. Shane Bieber was really good this year, All-Star MVP. Doesn't really mean anything, but was in the game. Danny Salazar was back for a start on Thursday. Supposedly he might be hurt again after that start, but I don't know if it's major. Mike Clevenger has been really good this year. So those pieces exist, and you're hoping that everyone else, quote unquote, will tide you over until Corey Kluber gets back. Right. He can be his former Cy Young self. Maybe if everything goes perfectly well, you can get Carlos Carrasco in there in the mix as well if he's healthy enough to play even a minor role. So that's the logic. And now you trade that surplus guy, somebody as good as Bauer is, to bring in elite offense, potentially elite offensive additions like Puig and Franmil Reyes.
Yeah, I think it's almost kind of like a changing of the guard in the Indians rotation, which it seems like forever that it's been Kluber, Carrasco, Bauer.
Sure.
And now Kluber and Carrasco are both on the 60-day IL. But Shane Bieber, Zack Plesac, and Mike Clevenger have had really solid years for that team so far. So maybe they're thinking, let's get some value for Bauer. Let's ride those 3 guys I just mentioned. And if Corey Kluber comes back and he's anything like he was, we're set. We're set for a playoff series.
There's your wild card pitcher.
Right. There's your wild card pitcher, and you like your chances. You'd hope that you can compete in a series, but I think it would be tough for this team to beat the Yankees or Astros in a 7-game series. But hey, they weren't in the division race for quite some time because the Twins were running away with it. But now they're so much in striking distance that they could win the AL Central, and I think that is very much a win for 2019 for this team.
Let me make one final point, is that you're right. The Indians are right back in this division race, but some people have pointed out, and I don't remember the numbers exactly, unfortunately, but their record in July was fabulous, but that's because the Indians played terrible teams.
I did see that.
So pretty much this was coming out from Minnesota Twins base and their fans to kind of explain why Cleveland had gained so much ground. So the Twins play the Yankees a bunch of times, for instance, in the month of July. Didn't fare very well in one of the best series that we've seen, 1 or 2, top 5, top 10 games this year. But the Twins lost I'm pretty sure they lost that series. And meanwhile, the Indians were playing bottom feeders. They were playing the Royals.
But you can't fault the Indians for that, and they are winning the games that they have. So
that's always the saying, is they winning games they're supposed to. You're right. So of course. So that's the first step. Win those games. Try to get everybody back healthy-ish, and try to compete for that division. It's very much within the striking distance.
Yeah, absolutely. You win the wild card game, and that's a team that's been to the playoffs many times recently. Their manager, Francona, is very much experienced in playoff runs and making those tough decisions. Your younger pitchers are playing well. You have veterans, and now your offense is better. Who knows? It's a team to watch.
That's true. So Definitely. It's sneakily a team that might have seriously improved.
3 games back in the division. We thought that the Twins were going to double-digit run away with that lead in the AL Central, and how the turntables
Indeed.
have turned.
All right, well, I don't have a great transition, but let's move along to deadline day itself. So many trades, as we mentioned. So let's just get into a couple of them. We just talked about two legitimate hitters. Somebody that has upside as good as anybody in Franmil Reyes, and somebody that has contributed at a consistent level when he's not suspended for a long time in Yasiel Puig. Those are two great hitters that were moved to one team. Right. But really, in terms of a trade for a hitter, we didn't see too many of them. We expected maybe Hunter Pence would be moved. We mentioned Hunter Renfroe, Trey Mancini, somebody that I think will be maybe not a star, but a premier player in this league very soon, especially if he leaves Baltimore. I don't know. People floated Whit Merrifield. I didn't think that was going to happen, but that was a possibility. The list goes on. Right. But really, in terms of trades straight up for hitters, we didn't see too many. So the Rays were involved in two of them, which we expected might be the case. They were linked to Renfroe and Pence. So they got Jesus Aguilar and Eric Sogard, two very different players that have both been in the lineup starting on Thursday. So that's a trade to help them. We don't have to talk about that too much. But those are two hitter trades that did happen. But really the premier one, Nick Castellanos from the Tigers to the Cubs. And I didn't put this in writing anywhere, and I'm regretting it. So I can't, you won't see this, confirmed anywhere, but I thought this was going to happen for a month.
You did mention it. I will admit that Tim was right in this situation.
I don't know why I didn't put it
That's why you have to write it down, put it in an envelope, put the date on it, and then put it in our GoodHacks filing cabinet, and then we'll refer back
Time capsule it.
Yeah.
I'm just afraid to be old takes exposed, I guess, is the problem.
Right, of course. So I like this move for the Cubs, but I also don't like it in the sense that he's kind of just a righty Kyle Schwarber, in the sense that I don't think Castellanos will be as effective as he could be in the AL in the NL.
Okay.
Because he can't be DH'd. And so you're throwing him out in left field. I don't think of him as a tremendous defender. I'm sure that you're looking up his
I am going to look
now.
up his defensive metrics.
Tim is my stat guy.
I have to do something here.
So he's going to help their lineup, and he balances well with Rizzo right in the middle of that order, and Javi Baez and Chris Bryant. I mean, what more could you want?
Right.
Nicholas Castellanos has perennially been a very solid hitter since the days where he was with Miggy Cabrera and even Prince Fielder in the Tigers lineup.
Sure.
But I just don't envision, game 160 of the season, Castellanos making a diving catch in left field and saving the game. Like, if Madden sticks around, and I feel like it's been, 2-3 years now that they've thought about firing him, but I digress.
Very true.
If let's say Castellanos hits 2 home runs early in a game, but it's tied heading into the 8th, the Cubs also traded for Kemp
Tony
from
Kemp.
the Astros, Tony Kemp.
The Astros got
who is a second baseman outfield specialist.
Right.
He's a pretty good defender. If I'm a manager of a team and it's tied and you're trying to help your bullpen guys, Kimbrel comes in and you don't want errors, you're going to put Kemp out there.
Sure.
Or maybe Almora, if he's still with them at that point, or Ian Happ, which means you're taking Castellanos' bat out of the lineup in that situation. So it's not like they gave up too much. I don't think the Cubs can say, oh, well, we gave an arm and a leg to make this happen. I hope it works out. They made the move. It's not going to hurt them in the long run unless the guys that they gave up turn out to be all-stars or whatever.
Right.
But
they're tough to they're both top 25 prospects for the for the Cubs. Will be probably slightly better than that for the Tigers, but you're right. Nobody groundbreaking.
So they addressed a need in the sense that they needed an outfield righty bat.
Yep.
Because I don't think they were going to move Chris Bryant out there. I know they've played with that a little bit.
He's been out there before.
But what about you? Like, I don't envision this being a productive move for them in the biggest scope when you look at every aspect of baseball. I don't think that his offense will outweigh the managerial challenges, the defense, the speed. anything like that. I think that there were other options for them that would have potentially been better, like a Whit Merrifield.
I think in terms of the versatility, absolutely. And you're right, the Cubs are a team, and there are a few of them, some of the analytic teams, and really more of the underlying trend there is a Joe Madden team that likes players that can play all over the place. Hence why Ben Zobrist, who started with the Rays, is now back with Joe Madden on the Cubs.
And he hasn't been playing with them pretty much all year.
Well, he's on rehab right now to try to get back into and he's had kind of an interesting story this year as well. But so maybe he comes back and can be an important player around the infield or around the outfield too. But Castellanos came up as a third baseman, like you mentioned, when Miguel Cabrera, Prince Fielder, and Victor Martinez were still actually viable players for the Tigers. He's been in right field pretty much exclusively the last year and a half, 2 years now. So I do think that this is a place, left field would be a good place for him for the Cubs. I just dropped my microphone. I think it still works though. I think this would be I think left field is a fine place for him. And you're right, he's a righty bat. The Cubs struggle to hit lefties. I think this is a proven commodity. Their batting average this year is 30, 40 points lower against lefties than it is against righties. And obviously loads fewer plate appearances.
That surprises me, actually.
And Castellanos this year hits about 30, 40 points better. This is just batting average, I grant you, but we can go into it a little bit deeper if you wanted. The point is, he's proven against lefty pitchers in his career. He's got like twice as many home runs against righty pitchers and 3 times as many plate appearances. So the trend is there against lefty pitchers. I think he's proven against lefties, and for somebody like that, you have to find where he goes in the lineup because you would love to have that bat with everybody else that you just mentioned. That's
a great part of the order.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't care how you shake it out, because we've talked about moving Rizzo to the top of the order. Other teams have tried similar things to that. It's worked out fairly well for him. So Baez hits towards the top of the order sometimes. But regardless of the order of those guys, if that's your 2 through 5 or your 3 through 6 in some order, Bryant, Baez, Rizzo, and Castellanos, and of course and Castillo, or I'm sorry, Contreras. My apologies, Wilson Contreras. Yeah. Then that's a tremendous middle of the order, and you don't have to give up Schwarber to do it. Which is, I was wondering if that might be the case.
I think the last thing I'll say about this is the Cubs have surprised us in this division. They are a threat to win it, if not get to the wild card game. So it's contend now mode for them. This isn't just a move just to make a move.
Of course.
What was I going to say? I'm thinking. Okay, so you hit it on the nose in the sense that they needed somebody to help with their lack of hitting against lefties. That's what I was going to say. Let's think of some effective lefties in that division. Oh, Josh Hader.
Decent option.
Right. So there it is. Potential wild card matchup or potential end of the season matchup. And this is the 180 flip to what I said 5 minutes ago. Castellanos doesn't start, and you use him as a bat in late innings
instead of
to hit against lefties when you need a double in the gap at the end of the game. So it just depends on how they want to use him. And they have, honestly, like a month, I guess, to figure that out. And every game counts. So the pressure's on for Madden to, utilize him in different ways and shift that lineup in different ways, but he's got to figure it out soon.
So how about the rest of that division? We've mentioned this for weeks now. This is the best division in baseball. Yeah. It's the closest right now in pretty much every way. And the Cubs were at the top of that division for pretty much all of June, but no longer. The St. Louis Cardinals just took 2 out of 3 from them at Busch Stadium this week, and the Cardinals now have sole possession of first place in the Central going into this weekend. So let's talk about those other teams in the division. We mentioned the Reds a little bit there, maybe still in the mix now that they have a second ace with Bauer. Probably not, but you can't count them out necessarily.
Sure,
Pirates are done, really. Even though they brought in Corey Dickerson to help offset the loss of McCutchen.
They traded Dickerson to Philly.
I'm sorry, you're right. So they traded away from
So they're selling. They're done.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. And McCutchen has been out since the 3rd. I'm stuck in the past here. So let's stick in the present. Those other 2 teams in the division, talking about the Cardinals and the Brewers.
Yeah.
With those 2 teams and the Cubs, it's anybody's guess right now how well the Cardinals are playing. We're talking about other teams that made moves to bring in people. The Cardinals are not one of those teams.
No. So it's a 3-man race. At the end of the season, it's going to come down to the wire. The Cubs made a move. We just talked about it. They're going to be better because of Castellanos. It's not like they're going to be worse. But, and this is the trend throughout this entire pod, if I'm a Cardinals fan, I'm furious. If I'm a Brewers fan, I'm not happy. The Brewers did more than the Cardinals did. They got Drew Pomeranz, who has had a really bad year, but he's been okay in the past, and maybe a change of scenery, that argument we've used in the past, that he just needed a different ballpark to pitch in, and maybe he'll figure it out. They traded Aguilar. They have Marcus Thames to play at first. They have other options. Their offense has been pretty good. They have Christian Yelich, who's been pretty good too.
He's all right.
But here's my thing. And the Brewers got Jacob Faria from
and the Aguilar trade, right?
Right.
And Jordan Lyles. So those are 3.
So they helped their pitching.
Right.
But
those are 3 back-end starter types.
I don't think that the Brewers did enough necessarily to go out and win the division. And here's my big thing. I think that the Cardinals totally messed up this deadline. We did not even consider the Cardinals when we were trying to figure out what the divisional and wildcard races would be. That's partly on us, but also they didn't show that potential in the first half. Now Goldie's getting hot, but do we really think with this current roster that they're just going to easily win the wild card race or easily win the NL Central? I don't think so. I don't think that Paul Goldschmidt's going to put his entire team into his backpack and just strut through the rest of the season and win them a playoff spot. You had an opportunity to go out and get somebody to help their pitching staff or help their bullpen or help their offense. Those are the 3 things. And they didn't do anything. The only thing they did was trade away Jed Jerko.
Right, who's been hurt almost all year.
So what was the thought process there? Was it a Dave Dombrowski kind of idea where, oh, yeah, we're fine. We're one of the best teams in the league. We got this. That blows my mind. And if you're a Cardinals fan, you're sweating bullets right now because other teams in your division, yes, but in the National League got better. The Atlanta Braves got better.
Lots better.
The Nationals made moves in their bullpen. They got better. This wild card race, if it wasn't up in the air before the 31st, it might even be even more up in the air. And I like the Cardinals. I think that they're really good. But you could have gotten one player, at the very least, put all the different needs into a hat and shuffle it around and pick it out and be like, oh, a lefty bullpen arm. Okay, let's go out and get somebody.
Sure.
Oh, a quick, versatile outfielder. Let's trade for Billy Hamilton. You could have done anything, and they did nothing.
They did nothing.
And it's just confusing to me. Do you feel that, because you follow the Cardinals for years, are you okay with what they did? I know you're not a fan necessarily, but...
Yeah, I'll steer your phrase. If I'm a Cardinals fan, I'm scratching my head at the very least. I think that there are loads of places that this team could use some kind of improvement. You don't need to go out and make a big groundbreaking trade. You didn't need to be involved in that Trevor Bauer trade. You don't need to trade the farm for an ace pitcher. I thought they could have... We talked about the Yankees not needing a mid-tier rotation piece. That wasn't going to put them over the edge. I don't know that that would put the Cardinals over the edge per se, but bringing in a pitcher like that, I thought was the easy answer. Yeah. So a veteran who has been around, knows how to pitch, if you will, has been good, and maybe can throw in a different look. How about Mike Minor? That was a perfect solution for me. Yeah. And obviously Lance Lynn has had a good year this year as well. I don't think the Cardinals would bring him back necessarily. He would have been a fit as well using those similar, the similar criteria. I thought Mike Minor would have made perfect sense. If you want another reliever after, Jordan Hicks is now out for the year, we talked on a couple episodes ago that they have a couple of solid options and Andrew Miller has been better as the summer has progressed. Is that really what you're comfortable with? Do you want Giovanni Gallegos being your get-out guy and or Carlos Martinez? And Carlos, that's the closer, sometimes? Right? So Gallegos is the get-out-of-trouble guy, and Martinez is the closer. Is that what you want? I guess so.
I guess that's just the way we have to look at this. I think that again, I'll circle back. They had an opportunity to address any of their needs, and they didn't do anything. And I think that if the Cardinals come up 0.5 games short in the division and have to play in a wild card game, and Miles Mikolas happens to have a bad game, and you lose that game, you can think of who you're going to point your finger at. It's the executives and general manager for not making any move because, yeah, you can't quantify this, but maybe the one move that you made would have helped in that situation. Maybe having Eric Sogard would have helped. Maybe getting Mike Minor to pitch third in your rotation would have helped. Maybe getting Hudson from the Blue Jays instead of letting him go to the Nationals would have helped. You didn't have to get Greinke. You didn't have to get Bumgarner. I know that Bumgarner was like rumored, I guess, to potentially be an option for them, but that wasn't a necessity. They have decent pitching. They have a guy to pitch the wild card game. But in terms of supporting their efforts and bolstering their entire strength as a roster, they did nothing. And I think that they will regret it. I'm going on tape. I think that the Cardinals will regret this. If they don't make the playoffs, or if they don't get through that wild card game, or if they lose in the first round, I think that this is partly why. They have to get back to full health too, for like Marcelo Zuna and Harrison Bader and
Carpenter and Molina are on
Molina.
those.
Yeah.
Carpenter and Molina are on rehab right now. We should be back within 10 days, so that's a good starting point. But you're right. I think they're expecting that core, the guys that you just mentioned, Ozuna especially, and Carpenter, will both be back and help out Paul Goldschmidt. He can't hit 7 home runs over 8 games again, or whatever it was.
I love Paul Goldschmidt.
Me too.
He's so good. But I don't think this is not the NBA. You can't just ride one player.
It's not. It's impossible to keep it up.
Right.
For that, there's a chance. You know how baseball works. He could go cold the next 2 weeks and not hit another home
He
run.
could get hurt.
That too.
You know, like they're just not planning as safely as they could have. And it's not even being safe. It's being bold and making a move. Like, are you really going to be sad about giving up your 34th prospect? I have no idea who that is, but and no offense to them, they're probably expendable in the grand scheme of things.
You would think so.
Especially if, wow, you're halfway through the season and you're leading the best division in baseball, best in terms of top 3 teams being really talented. Oh, but you know what? No. Deadline, it's fine. We'll just stay put right here and hope that it'll be okay. I don't know.
So let's go to the other teams in the National League that made moves while the Cardinals were standing pat, if you will. We talked about the Brewers bringing in a couple of arms, really not too much to write home about there. You mentioned earlier that they're trying to get healthy too, similar strategy to the Indians. But 2 other National League, perhaps not frontrunners, but serious contenders out of the National League East were extremely active in the late stages on Wednesday, made legitimate moves to improve an area of need. For both of those teams, it's the bullpen. I'm talking about the Nationals and the Braves. They came out, to me, very strong after the deadline.
Yeah, Shane Green slides in as the new Atlanta Braves closer. And they had Luke Jackson in that role, who's been okay.
Been all right.
Clearly good enough to have them be ahead of the pack in the NL East, which is a very solid division. And you get a veteran righty who is top 10 in the league in saves. And when was the last time the Braves had a lights-out closer? Kimbrel?
Yeah, of course.
Jim Johnson in his, couple good years? I don't know. I'm happy for them. I think that they are solidifying the fact that they're going to win the NL East and setting themselves up for success for that divisional round. I didn't pick them to go too far. If I remember correctly, I think I have them losing to the Brewers in that first round matchup.
That's
because
right.
The Brewers are winning the NL Central in my playoff bracket that I came up with.
It was a month ago. Well, it was a month ago.
Happening, right? But I think that they're setting themselves up for success in the NLDS. I won't speak beyond that because I don't think Shane Green will win you a series, but he's really effective in the bullpen. He slides right in, and they have so many different arms, Tim, that they even had to send some people down.
Sure. And they brought, the bullpen is now revamped. And we mentioned, I mentioned when I profiled that they might try to get a setup guy, how young the bullpen is.
Yeah.
And so now they've got veterans, experienced closers, guys that can do a couple of different things. So I'm talking about Mark Melanson, an experienced closer who hasn't closed the last couple of years because he's been with the Giants, but he's actually been okay.
Yeah, and he won't close, but
no,
he's
but you
gonna
don't
help.
need him to.
Yeah,
You don't need him to anymore. So now you've got other veterans, and now you're bringing in Chris Martin, who's not a veteran, but closed a little bit this year for the Rangers. Now, honestly, I thought the Braves punted on Colby Allard to get Chris Martin. I thought that was an aggressive trade. Now I'm stepping back into the prospect analyst role. Allard has been I don't want to say a projected top starter, but a high-profile starter prospect for the last couple of years, and he's been solid in AAA for the last 2 or so years. And I thought the Braves kind of gave up on him for not as much in Chris Martin. They got a lot in Shane Green, a proven commodity, didn't get as proven of a response in Martin. But to get Green, they had to give up Travis Demeritte, who's hit 20 home runs in AAA this year.
Especially with their rotation struggles this year.
Right.
I mean,
No, Allard couldn't. Right.
is a bright spot moving forward, but if you're saying that he was really good in AAA, that hurts.
Yeah, and he didn't really cut it in the majors when he's been up very limited action. So it's not like he's not started 20 games and you're going to punt on him like they did with John Gant, who's now had an effective reliever with the Cardinals. He hasn't really had his moment yet. My guess is he might be up with the Rangers later on this year, Allard. I don't know. Anyway, they bring in 3 new relievers to add into the younger group. Obviously, Jackson, very young. Sean Newcomb's been great this year. He's very young. I mentioned Josh Tomlin. He's 34. This is his first full year as a reliever. Was in the bullpen a lot last year, started a few games. This is his first full-time relief gig. So now you bring in other guys who are now proven relievers, Green and Melanson and Martin. And that is now how you're going to build out that bullpen. And you hope that the young starters that you have, Mike Soroka keeps it up, Max Fried keeps it up, everybody else helps out, and that's how you're going to build around with a great hitting team. Adam Duvall now up from AAA. Finally, he hit close to 30. We talk about AAA. Maybe it's not as impressive to you, the normal baseball fan, but Adam Duvall was one of the best hitters in the minor leagues this year. We know about him. This isn't Travis Demeritte, who you're probably hearing about for the first time ever.
He's played before.
Right,
with the Reds.
right. He was fine for the Reds,
Yep.
and then they gave up on him essentially, and he decided, and he proved this year that he can hit still.
Right.
Talking about Adam Duvall, close to 30 home runs in AAA.
Yeah, if he figures it out and Donaldson stays hot, that is a very dangerous hitting team. The only worry I have is their starters.
Okay.
But with the way baseball is these days, with bullpens just taking over super early, I think they'll be fine. Starting rotation-wise, I don't think anybody's better than the Astros right now.
But the one team that might be close is the Nationals, which was a team that has a great starting rotation.
Right.
Before we get to the Astros, the ultimate final point here. But the Nationals, really quickly, great starting rotation, top 5 or 6 in starter ERA, if you want to go by that. Last in Major League Baseball in bullpen ERA as of this week. And they made some moves to improve it as well. We both thought that Shane Green would be a great choice to go there.
Yeah.
Lost out on him for various reasons. Don't know exactly why yet.
Right.
Didn't get him. They had to bring in a couple of other guys instead to at least improve a serious area of weakness.
Yeah, they got Brynus Elias from the Mariners, who's been pretty solid. Another lefty to go with Doolittle. And they got Hudson from the Blue Jays. And one more guy.
Hunter Strickland
Hunter Strickland.
in a separate deal from the Mariners.
Which is ironic because when he was with the Giants, was throwing at Bryce Harper in the playoffs when Harper was still in the Nationals.
Good point. Okay.
No hard feelings,
I'm sure.
I guess. Yeah.
I want to see that wild card game, right?
Oh, my gosh. They definitely got better. I just think that they could have done more. I really want to know why they didn't end up getting Shane Green or why they didn't go after Alex Colomé or Felipe Vasquez. Maybe that was too much of a reach in terms of what the Pirates were asking. If the Dodgers didn't get them, clearly, then they were untouchable.
I seem to have underestimated the return that Vasquez would have commanded. He would have wanted 2 of the Dodgers' top-tier prospects, including maybe somebody like Will Smith, who I said might be expendable, but now the time that he's been up in the majors the last 2 weeks, he's been fantastic. So they weren't going to get rid of him.
I mean, the Braves gave up something to get Shane Green.
Yep.
Maybe the Nationals were hesitant to touch Carter Kieboom in a deal, their top prospect,
Yeah.
which is understandable, of
Right.
course. But same thing with the Cardinals. We didn't expect the Nationals to be at this point. They're tied for a wild card spot right now, and you have to assume that they would win a wild card game with the starting stuff that they have, assuming Scherzer heals up before October. So did they do enough? That's something that we have to wait and see. I think if I'm a Nationals fan, I'm pleased, but not enough. I wish they did more, but okay, we did something. Let's figure this out and roll with it.
So I guess the ultimate point before we move on here is that something we talked about last week or the week before that episode was, if you're the Nationals, your bullpen is Sean Doolittle, good, you're feeling pretty good, and then look at who
nobody
sets
else.
him up.
Yeah.
So now your bullpen is Sean Doolittle, and
And
now
there's three
setting him up,
guys.
you've got Elias, Strickland, and Hudson in some order. To
Right.
me, that is a vast improvement.
And you get Scherzer, Strasburg, Corbin to go 6+. You're
You
golden.
don't need anybody else, do you?
Right.
In theory.
But hey, if Strickland, who's notorious for getting hurt, if his body is ailing, if Elias, who's young, happens to have something happen to him, then you're scrambling.
Sure.
So I don't think it was necessarily get more bullpen arms. I think it was get the best ones, and they didn't.
That's fair. They
Yeah.
didn't get anybody top tier. Hudson was listed as a top tier pure setup man in that sense.
But I don't know if it would have been worth it to give up Kieboom for one of the
Not even for Green.
I don't think so.
I don't think that's. I certainly didn't think that
even
was
for
worth it.
Vasquez. I mean, like we saw with the Dodgers, no one was able to touch their top prospects.
Sure.
So
Yeah, I mean that was what it comes down to. I didn't think giving up Gavin Lux was who their shortstop prospect was
Right.
worth getting Vasquez. Clearly they didn't either. I don't think giving up Kieboom was worth getting Shane Green.
yeah, there's a certain point where prospects are expendable, but
Right.
if they're at the top of your list,
Not for just anybody.
you hold on to them.
It takes a
Yeah.
certain deal like the Taylor Trammell deal, the
Right.
Reds' #1 prospects, for that to ever be moved.
Right.
All right, speaking of top prospects, let's get finally to the ultimate trade. We can talk about the biggest trades. Trevor Bauer, I think, was the one that really set everything in motion, got us realizing that we might actually see something this trade deadline. But finally, everything came to a head right at the limit, right at the last
the
second.
very end, at the buzzer.
A true blockbuster trade. Zack Greinke goes from the Diamondbacks to the Astros for a whopping haul of prospects. But before we touch them, just what's your reaction to that? Zack Greinke joining already one of the greatest rotations in the game.
I mean, we could save this answer to the end of this conversation, but to put it bluntly, Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander, and Zack Greinke with Wade Miley and Aaron Sanchez, who they got in a different deal.
Sure.
I challenge you to find a better 5 starters on one team right now, and I think that deal won them the American League pennant. We'll see what happens, but I mean, how can you not envision those 3 guys those 3 guys at the top of their rotation, putting you in such a good position to win any series? And yes, the Yankees are great. They have a great offense. But those are perennial, proven. All 3 of them have been Cy Young Award winners, I believe. And if not,
Cole
they've been
soon
in the
enough.
running. Right. So they're going to shut offensive teams down.
That's what they do.
And I don't see that rotation combined with their amazing offense not getting to the World Series.
I think that's the big takeaway, isn't
Yeah.
it? So you already have a great rotation and somebody who I've been skeptical about in the past in Wade Miley, who has had a decent year, and you only needed him to be your number 3. If you could shift him back as now
Right.
your number 4, but that comes
Or
secondary.
even a bullpen
Sure,
asset in the
and that comes
playoffs.
secondary to the fact that they brought in Zack Greinke,
Right.
who has kind of gone under the radar, I think, the last couple of years because he plays for the Diamondbacks, who don't get a lot of attention and have just been middle of the pack the last few years.
Right.
So you bring in a guy with that pedigree to join a likely Hall of Famer and Justin Verlander, and a guy that's been as great this year as Garrett Cole has. Might not be the Cy Young winner this year, but he's probably going to be a finalist.
Yeah.
That's how good Garrett Cole has been
Yeah.
this year. That is an amazing pitching rotation.
It's tremendous.
So
it doesn't get much better.
You're right.
Yeah.
So you said find me a better 5. You can't.
I don't think so.
I think Aaron Sanchez's numbers haven't been good this year. We go with the slightly advanced stats. Say he should be loads better than he is. His record is terrible, but he takes losses by allowing.
He was the Jays' number 2.
Sure.
Like he's a number 2 on a low-level team.
Right. Exactly.
So now on one of the best teams in baseball, he's their 5. That's
Okay.
crazy. And they have people in the bullpen too. It's not like, oh, you get to Verlander and then you're golden the rest of the way.
Right.
They have people in the bullpen.
So we'll see if Colin McHugh comes back. He's the other guy on that borderline. Joe Biagini was in that Aaron Sanchez trade. He started in the past. He could be a long relief type guy, setting up and trying to fill in for Ryan Presley, who's hurt right now.
True.
But then the back end of that bullpen is excellent when Presley is hurt. We talked about him on the first season of this
Ozuna,
podcast,
too.
and then Osuna has had an excellent year. He's still around.
Imagine if Lance McCullers wasn't hurt this year. That'd be insane.
Maybe this trade doesn't happen.
Or if they didn't deal or let Charlie Morton go.
Sure.
Who's having a tremendous year. Yeah, the reason why I said that this won them the pennant also is that the Yankees did absolutely nothing, and we probably don't have time for that conversation, but the Yankees are great, but they didn't do anything.
Nothing at all.
You look at the list of every single deal, and you won't find them on there at all.
Nope.
And they have needs. We were doing this the other day, we were matching up the Astros rotation next to the Yankees rotation and trying to envision what the matchups would be in the ALCS. So Verlander against Tanaka.
I would say Tanaka.
I guess.
I think that's a given.
I think you lean towards Verlander.
Right.
Garrett Cole against, and then you don't really know because the Yankees haven't had a strict ordered pitching rotation,
That's correct.
especially with injuries too. So let's assume that
I would vote for James Paxton.
or Severino gets back to full
He
health.
hasn't pitched all year, really.
Right, or you're super high on Domingo Germán.
Germán, perhaps.
But any of those,
So
I don't
pick-
think
pick somebody.
Okay, so Paxton goes 2.
Against
I don't
Cole.
think you have Cole losing to Paxton. Obviously, it's not just like a one-on-one boxing
It's
match
not.
here, but I think that you give the upper hand to Cole, and then Greinke, who's a number 1 on most, if not every team,
Many teams, yep.
and he's against Severino, who hasn't pitched all year, or he's against he's against Jay Happ, or he's against Germán. And again, you give the edge to the Astros. So finally, when you get to 4, depending on the order from the Yankee side, maybe Happ has a great game and beats Wade Miley, or something along those lines. And hey, the Yankees have seen Sanchez before, so that would help them.
Sure.
But Sanchez probably won't even need to start
Probably
a game
not.
in the playoffs. So all you need is 3 great pitchers, a deep bullpen, and an electric offense, and that's everything that they have and more.
So let's go with the one last aspect of this trade. You look at the haul that just the pure number of guys that the Astros had to ship off to get
Right.
Zack Greinke back. That leads back into that number that you mentioned at the very beginning of the show, the number of players that were moved. But something you pointed out immediately, because I was looking at this list and thinking, wow, these are really great prospects. But you pointed this out to me immediately. And, you can debate prospect rankings if you will, but the top 2 prospects in the Astros organization, Forrest Whitley and Kyle Tucker, they are both still there. They didn't trade.
I don't know how they did that.
They did not trade either They did not trade either of the players of that caliber who are consensus future MLB starters at the very
If
minimum.
not all-stars, yeah.
They did not trade either of those players for a player that we agree is as good as Zack Greinke is.
Right.
Both of them are still there. We figured you'd have to get rid of Forrest Whitley at the very least to get a pitcher like that.
Yeah, and I'll do it one more time. If I'm a Houston Astros fan, I am giddy because I got an additional ace to go along with my 2 aces, and we didn't give up our top 2 prospects. Seth Beer is incredible, and the other 3 guys too that I don't know as well, they're highly touted prospects. And you know that Houston Astro prospects are solid.
Sure.
Based on who's come up in that farm system in the past.
Sure.
They are so far removed from triple-digit losses. My goodness.
Yeah.
And so there are different ways of looking at it. you could be cynical from an Astros perspective and say, wow, you're getting a past his prime 35-year-old Zack Greinke who is long removed from his Cy Young days and is owed quite a bit of money, and we just gave up a kitchen sink for him. But you can also say, hey, we're World Series frontrunners potentially, and we just got even better. Top that. And the Dodgers didn't do much either.
So that's my ultimate question. The last couple of weeks, I've compartmentalized this. I've framed this trade deadline lead up like this. I thought the Yankees needed another starter to put them as World Series favorites. I thought the Dodgers needed an elite bullpen arm to make them World Series favorites. Those two teams did not get either of those pieces. The Astros got better. Does that make them World Series favorites?
Put me on the spot.
It's a leading question,
Yeah.
I know, but if that was what we thought that the Yankees needed, because look, as it stands right now, those are the two best teams in Major League Baseball, the Yankees and the Dodgers. No one is disputing that.
Yeah.
That has been the case, and no one has disputed that so far. But do you believe that can either of those teams still win the World Series? Absolutely. That was my point.
Yeah.
When I said the Dodgers need to get Felipe Vasquez, I said need. They didn't need him.
No.
They still are favorites to win the National League.
They're doing okay.
Right, so they're very much okay,
Sure.
at the very least. So they still could win the World Series. The
Right.
Yankees still could win the World Series. But don't you have to put the Astros as frontrunners right now at the beginning of August?
Yeah, I mean, so you had the Astros losing to the Dodgers, and I have the Yankees losing to the Dodgers.
That's right.
Or have, not necessarily anymore. That's what we had a month ago.
That's
when
right.
We did our breakdowns.
If you did those breakdowns now, how would your World Series
It would
look?
definitely be Astros Dodgers based on that one deal for sure.
Okay.
I think the Yankees could still get there.
Of course.
And injuries and chance and all that stuff
The
plays
Twins
into this.
could still get there.
Sure, Indians too. But you got to predict Astros Dodgers, and man, imagine if the Astros beat the Dodgers again, 2 years removed now from doing it. And are they a better team now than they were then? I think they might be.
Could make an argument.
Yeah, Morton and McCullers are not on the team, and their offense is a little different. But now
Right.
with
If Cole in the mix,
Cole and a Jordan Alvarez, and
Bregman is an MVP light.
yeah, and as soon as Altuve and Springer are consistently healthy, and I think you might see them rest a little bit towards the end of the year.
That's fair.
Granted, they might be fighting for the top
spot.
which is important because the difference between playing against the Twins versus the Indians or the Rays, no offense, it's big.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And
The
right.
playoffs, MLB, what's the playoff slogan? Like anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
So they got so much better. They gave up a lot, but it was worth it, especially for this year. And I'm really excited to see that team fight for another ring. I mean, it would be hard not to pick them against the Dodgers right now.
I don't think I can disagree. The Astros going for it, making the huge move, bringing in a guy like Zack Greinke, Cy Young caliber pitcher who's having another really good year. To give up a lot to get a lot like that. And that's what the Astros proved. But if it proves anything else, it might prove that they're World Series frontrunners right now. But as we always like to say, we'll see.
We shall see, folks.
Trade deadline winds blowing, but finally they've started to come to a standstill. We're through the trade deadline season. We're into August and now fully looking at playoff pushes the rest of the way. So let us know what you think. Which team won the trade deadline? If you're a fan of those other teams, are you scratching your head? Are you angry, as Max would say? Let us know what you think. We'll see you next time on Good Hacks.